Welcome back to the Mayoral Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Matt Mayer. In this episode, I'm going to be talking exclusively about the war between Israel and Hamas. But before I get into today's content, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. First thing that I'm going to cover here is a discussion that was between a Fox News anchor, Martha MacCallum, and the Assistant Defense Secretary, John Kirby, regarding the potential of nuclear war. Now, in this clip, Martha asks Kirby if he stands by Biden's comments that said, quote, "The only existential threat humanity faces, even more frightening than nuclear war, is global warming going above 1.5 degrees in the next 20 years. Kirby concurs and says, quote, "Absolutely, he does. Climate change is an existential threat." MacCallum then asks, "More frightening than nuclear war?" Kirby says yes. These climate cultists are this insane that they think it is more important or more potentially harmful than nuclear war. To counter that, the National Statistical Institute of Norway is saying that climate change is not the threat that everyone's making it out to be. This article is from October 4th of this year, and you can read through the whole article. I'm just going to highlight one part here. It says, quote, "The results imply that the effect of man-made CO2 emissions does not appear to be sufficiently strong to cause systemic changes in the pattern of the temperature fluctuations. In other words, our analysis indicates that with the current level of knowledge, it seems impossible to determine how much the temperature increase is due to CO2 emissions." So again, right in the face of Biden claiming that CO2 emissions and global warming is the biggest threat to humanity over nuclear war, which would be completely and utterly destructive of potentially everyone on the face of the earth. Obviously, these attacks would most likely be in these large city centers like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Tokyo, these types of places that would annihilate tens of millions of people if these bombs were to be detonated. And again, the Biden administration and the leftists believe that climate change is more threatening to humanity than nuclear war. One of the big things that we're seeing is the support for Hamas. Now, this is a post from BLM supporting the terror attacks on Israel. Now, in this post, they talk about Black Lives Matter being a grassroots that stands in solidarity with the people of Palestine. But this is coming after the terror attack on Israeli civilians by Hamas. And like I said in a previous episode, it shows who these people are. There's a saying that goes around, and people on the left use this a lot too. When somebody shows you who you are, believe them. Black Lives Matter is showing us who they are in this post. Not only this one, there was another post from BLM Chicago that says that they stand with Palestine, and it was a silhouette of a paratrooper with a Palestinian flag. They removed the post after an immense amount of backlash in less than 24 hours. But again, you see who these people are. They are supporting the terrorist group. Now, I haven't seen any company that supported BLM back in 2020, 2021 come out and condemn this. That just shows who is in control right now. What's in control right now of the politics, what's in control right now of the culture is left-wing and far left-wing politics. So no one's coming out and publicly condemning this that previously supported Black Lives Matter. And it's pretty telling that this is where we are today with our politics and with our culture. It's a far left-wing tilt on politics and culture. And during this time, we've seen a lot of people pretend that the money that Joe Biden and the Biden administration unfroze with the prisoner exchange with Iran. We gave up 5 prisoners to Iran. Iran gave us 5 prisoners. And on top of that, the U.S. unfroze $6 billion worth of assets. That was less than a month prior to the attacks on the Israeli citizens from October 8th of this year. And people are pretending that they have nothing to do with one another. An obvious end here was going to be some type of major terror attack, and we saw that happen. And you'll see here in this video clip that I'm going to play that Trump makes the obvious prediction that when you free up funds to terrorists and claim that it's only for humanitarian aid, regardless of what they use it for, that frees up other funds that they previously may have used for their citizens, may have used for infrastructure, whatever it might have been. Now they can redirect those funds towards terrorist ends, which they've always supported terrorism. So here's the clip of what seems like an obvious end to this funding of Iran.
In exchange.
Didn't they also get 5 Iranians?
They will get 5 Iranians as well. Yeah, Jackie.
Then why would we need to add $6 billion on top of that?
This is the deal that we were able to strike.
Biden's ransom payment will be immediately used to stoke violence, bloodshed, and mayhem throughout the Middle East, putting Israel, the United States, and the entire world in very grave peril.
Joe Biden just lit a match to the Middle East. Israel has got to be on alert.
The news that the deal is moving forward is drawing criticism from both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill.
The way to avoid having hostages taken by Iran is to be strong, firm, and resolute, and to not use carrots in the form of $6 billion, but to use sticks in the form of threats to things that Iran holds dear.
$6 billion.
I'm going to pause it right there. Next clip is going to be Joe Manchin talking about it. Again, the obvious end here was that this was going to fund terrorism, and a month after the funds were released or unfrozen, a huge terrorist attack happens in Israel. Now, I believe that this was planned long before that. However, the additional funds that were freed to Iran certainly helped this terror attack and is going to help fund future terror attacks unless that money is taken back or frozen again by the United States.
They want released, and they're going to have choice. They're going to use it for humanitarian aid. There's no guarantees of that. So I'm very much concerned about this. So we're looking into it much deeper, but I'm very concerned.
Do you have concern that money is fungible?
There is obviously money is fungible.
The administration says this is limited to humanitarian aid, but they also acknowledge that funds are fungible, which means they can move them around and will aid them in being able to do other things. So people are very concerned.
It seems, very clear to the critics on both sides on the Hill that money is fungible. That's the criticism. Right. And now President Raisi has added fuel to the fire that already existed of criticism by saying we're going to do anything we want with it.
But isn't it true that this frees Tehran up to spend more on other nefarious goals like supporting terrorism and boosting its nuclear program?
And it's, I can't predict what they'll do going forward here.
As Nancy
I'm not going to play the rest of that clip, but of course, John Kirby seems to be the only person to say, well, I don't know what it's going to go for, but yeah, they could use it for terrorism, but I don't think that that's what's going to happen. We said for humanitarian aid. Well, clearly terrorists are going to do terrorist things, and if you enable them with additional funds, that's just going to lead to more future terror attacks. And I can't believe that anyone is letting the Biden administration get away with this, but again, people are going to come to the defense of the Biden administration again and again, even though it's obvious that these funds were going to be used for terrorism. It wasn't going to be very difficult to predict. And here's another exchange here between one of the Biden State Department officials and a reporter going after him, saying, like, clearly, what was this money going to be used for? It could have easily been used for terrorism, but you guys are claiming it was only for humanitarian aid. And the Biden administration, again, going to play defense and say it was only for humanitarian aid, so it definitely didn't fund it, which clearly money is fungible. It was going to be used for terrorist ends.
You guys are saying, yes, maybe that specific dollar with that serial note, the serial number, or that euro with that serial number on it, can't be used to fund terrorism. But the fact of the matter is, and you guys know this, is that it frees up money that Iran has already inside its own country to use for other things, so they don't have to spend that money on.
So let me
non-sanctioned items.
Let me say two things about that. One, the reason I read this exact quote is I have heard a fair bit of criticism about this money, including from the person who said this in November of 2018. And I thought it was fair to point out that this money was first allowed to accrue into these accounts under the Trump administration. And that's a point you did
then as well.
You did, and there are a number of people who have had a lot to say about this the last.
Again, well, now another angle, it's Trump's fault. It's always Trump's fault. Anything that happens under their watch is Trump's fault. He's talking about 2018 when the money was allowed to accrue. Now, this was not United States money. This was funds that that Iran was accruing from sales of things like natural gas and oil and those energy exports. And he's saying in 2018, Trump said that this could be used to fund terrorism. However, for 5 years, that money was not allowed. Iran was not allowed to use that money. And then the Biden administration, in a 5-for-5 prisoner exchange, also decides to unfreeze that $6 billion. And a month later, we get a huge terrorist attack. Somehow it's shocking to these people that have their heads buried in the sand. I don't even know if it's not unbelievable anymore. It's like this is now the norm. And this is the problem with some of what we've seen over the last 5-10 years in U.S. politics is that because dumb policies like this has become the norm, people aren't surprised when something like this happens. And when you continue to do dumb things, that becomes the expectation, and people are not outraged like they should be. They should absolutely be outraged. And on top of that, who knows how many of these terrorists have come through our southern border over the last 2.5 years since Biden has been president of the United States. The Iranians see it. This is a quote directly from them that says, any foolish Israel action against Iran will be met with devastating response. This Iranian official continues on and says, they were not the power that they were 30 to 40 years ago. If the United States does something foolish, they will be expelled from the region. The United States is very vulnerable. They see it. They know that when you do things like Joe Biden did and release funds or unfreeze funds for Iran in a 5-for-5 prisoner exchange, that is a clear sign of weakness. He also, earlier this year, released the Merchant of Death back to Russia in exchange for Brittany Griner. It's like this, they have no sense of what equals what. We're giving up a known terrorist, a guy known as the Merchant of Death, for a WNBA player. That seems extremely one-sided. And if it seems extremely one-sided to you, it's because it is extremely one-sided. But again, the Biden administration is thinking that these are wins. They do a 5-for-5 prisoner exchange, and they unfreeze funds of $6 billion. Why wouldn't Iran, who saw that horrible deal that the Biden administration made back earlier this year for a WNBA player versus a known international terrorist, why wouldn't they think that they can get an exchange like that? Don't be surprised by the end of this administration that there's going to be another awful exchange, and who knows what that's going to lead to. Because, like this guy says, the United States is vulnerable, clearly vulnerable with somebody like Joe Biden at the helm and the clowns that he's put in charge of his administration. Then you have, this is a great clip. This is a minute clip of Rashida Tlaib being asked multiple times. She is one of the members of the squad, a socialist, a pro-Palestinian member of Congress that cannot condemn the report of babies being decapitated. Now, I'm going to talk about the propaganda that's out there, okay? There has been claims that there was not 40 babies that were decapitated. We'll cover that. But it should be pretty easy for her to say, I condemn the slaughter of innocent babies. That's all she had to say. She didn't even have to say, I condemn Hamas. She didn't even have to say anything negative towards Palestine. Obviously, she's pro-Palestinian. She has a flag outside of her office of Palestine. And again, I've talked about this in the last episode. Debate the merits of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict over land, but this terror attack by Hamas cannot be defended. And again, she's having a very tough time condemning anything that they've allegedly done, even if it's something like murdering innocent babies and raping women. These are things that cannot be condemned by the radical left. Here's CNN confirming the report that babies were decapitated. A community note that says that CNN now says the Israeli government says that it cannot confirm that babies were beheaded by Hamas. She said she was misled. So again, propaganda coming out. There's going to be propaganda on both sides, regardless of the side of the aisle that you're, or the side that you're going to be on in this particular conflict. There's going to be propaganda on both sides. This is war. War is nothing but propaganda. The one thing I say that I will say that I will firmly believe when I see it is videos put out by Hamas of their brutality. Those are films those are them bragging. It's not Israel putting out propaganda to show these terrorists in an even worse light than they've already been in. This is them bragging about the things that they've done. And for those who sympathize with Hamas, and I don't know how you sympathize with Hamas, you need to be able to remove the people of Palestine, the civilians, from Hamas, okay? Those are two entirely different things. One is a group of people, civilians, and the other is a group of terrorists. Now, for people to sympathize with Hamas, they are the ones who don't seem to realize that Hamas is the elected government in the Gaza Strip. And they are in charge of taking care of their citizens. And they have not done so throughout the last 15, 20 years. And you see videos out there. They've put these videos out there of them taking apart water pipes and converting them into some type of bombs and missiles and things of that nature. These are the people that are now claiming, or that are saying that, Israel's cutting off the water to our people. Well, you've already cut off the water to your people by doing moves like that. They are the ones that have built military complexes underneath hospitals, underneath schools. These are things that are acts of war that they should have actually been addressed prior to this attack. Now Israel's trying to retaliate and go after these facilities, and they're underneath hospitals, they're underneath schools. And Israel's giving them warnings, whether people believe that or not. It's true. They do give out warnings to let these people know to evacuate. And then Hamas is blocking the evacuation of these areas. So Hamas is the one committing the war crimes. They committed the war crimes against Israeli citizens when they slaughtered them to the tune of, I think it's north of 1,200. And then they have always been committing these war crimes since they've taken control of the Gaza Strip by putting civilians in harm's way of military targets. So I don't understand how people could actually potentially sympathize with these terrorists from Hamas. And you have to realize something. If you're somebody who's on that side of Hamas, is they don't have the same values as you. Okay? I think people seem to see this as, they've just gotten wronged by Israel for 75 years, and this is them just lashing out, and if only Israel did X, or if only Israel did Y. That's not the case. They don't think like you. They are counting on that type of sympathy from people in the West. These are the same people that if they were in Gaza would be under the same type of tyranny as the people there. If you spoke out against them, you would be murdered. If you were gay, you would be murdered. These are the same people defending Hamas. You don't realize that these people, again, do not think like you. Don't think that for 1 second that they don't hate you too. They're just using you as a useful idiot to promote their propaganda. And it's hard to understand, but once you do, you will realize that they are the ones that are causing all this to their citizens. And I'm reminded of this clip from the best superhero movie of all time.
Targeting me won't get their money back. I knew the mob wouldn't go down without a fight, but this is different. They've crossed the line.
You crossed the line first, sir. You squeezed them, you hammered them to the point of desperation. And in their desperation, they turned to a man they didn't fully understand.
Criminals aren't complicated, Alfred. We just need to figure out what he's after.
With respect, Master Wayne, perhaps this is a man you don't fully understand either. A long time ago, I was in Burma. My friends and I were working for the local government. They were trying to buy the loyalty of tribal leaders by bribing them with precious stones. But their caravans were being raided in a forest north of Rangoon by a bandit. So we went looking for the stones. But in 6 months, we never met anyone who traded with him. One day, I saw a child playing with a ruby the size of a tangerine. The bandit had been throwing them away.
So why steal them?
Well, because he thought it was good sport. Because some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
So there you have a great clip from, like I said, my favorite superhero movie of all time, The Dark Knight. In that clip, Alfred explains to Bruce Wayne why these people why the mobsters turned to the Joker, and that this is not somebody that you completely understand. Some people don't want anything that you see as logical. Some people want something completely different and something that you can never fully understand. And that's what I'm trying to get across to my viewers, is that there are people out there, these terrorist organizations, that don't want anything logical. If it was as simple as a land dispute, then they would be able to take care of that using some type of military incursion. The thing is it's not that simple. These people want people that don't think like them to be eliminated, especially people that are Jewish. So then again, we go into, I was talking about propaganda. This is another form of propaganda from the New York Times. See this post here from Greg Price. He's a pretty good follow. Give him a follow on Twitter. It's Greg_Price11. And he's like, you can't make this up. The New York Times publishes a story referring to Hamas as terrorists and then changes it to gunmen. So in this link right here, it has the first original version where it says Hamas terrorists, and then the next version says Hamas gunmen. Again, these are forms of propaganda, softening language to make these people more relatable or making them seem less evil. This is the type of thing that the mainstream media does, and the New York Times has been doing it for years and years and years. So when you see things like that, realize what they're doing. Do not fall for it. Again, I said earlier, talk about the bad foreign policy where Biden letting the Iranians take advantage with a 5-for-5 prisoner exchange, plus the unfreezing of $6 billion worth of funds. These things start to become kind of the normal, these terrible deals. You look at, again, like I said, with Brittany Griner and the Merchant of Death exchange. This is the type of stuff that people become numb to. They become immune to. They're just like, oh, that's the U.S. We make bad deals. That's what we do. That's what previous administrations before Trump did. That's what the Obama administration did. That's what the Bush administration did. They had some of the worst foreign policy deals that you could ever imagine, and Biden's picking up where Trump interrupted after the Obama administration. And here's another example. This isn't just our mainstream media. The CBC from Canada tells journalists not to call Hamas terrorists in leaked memo. This is the type of stuff that we've become immune to, things that we've become numb to, things that we've come to expect. See this for what it is. It's the softening of language for left-wing purposes. These terrorists need to be called terrorists. They are cold-blooded murderers. Okay? You could be on the side of Palestine in the land dispute between Israel and Palestine for the last 75 years. You can condemn some of the things that Israel has done. That's fine. But you cannot be on the side of Hamas. You cannot be on the side of what they just did to Israel. You cannot be on that side. I'm going to play this video really quick. It's going to be, I'm going to have to translate it. There is a translation on it, but I will read the translation with the audio. So here, I'll play it. It's a 20-second video, and this is what they're doing. It says, what do they want to do with them? To have their way with them. What does that mean, have their way with them? Talk. I don't want to talk. Talk. What do they want to do with them? Dirty them. To rape them. And why do they take kids and the babies? To rape them. These are the people that are gunmen, not terrorists, according to the New York Times. According to the CBC, you can't call this guy a terrorist. You have to soften the language. Again, do you see the manipulation that's going on? Do you see the getting used to reducing language? Leads to things like this, to seeing these terror attacks, to foreign policy gaffes from the Biden administration. You're used to the foreign policy being terrible from the United States. You just become numb to it. You see the way that they change the language around and call mobs large gatherings, lootings and burnings, peaceful protests. Don't fall for it. See it. When you see it, call it out. Let your friends know, let your family know. This is what's going on. This is propaganda. I talked about it. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. There's going to be propaganda coming out from both sides in this war. It's going to be hard to decipher what's going to be true and what's not. I'm not going to be the expert on that by any stretch of the imagination. But when you see things like this, you see this terrorist saying they took the women and the children to rape them. And then you see the New York Times and the CBC not calling them terrorists, lightening the language, softening it. And you see what they're doing. They're trying to humanize these demons. Don't let them do it. Last thing here to illustrate my point is, I mentioned before, these people use civilians as shields. These are war crimes. They should have been punished years ago, prior to this. But they were not. These people don't care about their citizens. You, in your house, you care more about their citizens than they do. They use them as props. That's what they do. They don't care about the citizens of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians, the people that you actually care about. These terrorists that are in charge of the Gaza Strip, they don't care about them. This is from the Geneva Convention. This is Article 28. It says the presence of a protected person may not be used to render certain points or areas immune from military operations. This is exactly what they do. I mentioned they have buildings, military buildings, operations underneath hospitals, underneath schools. They don't care about their civilians. They want to attack Israel and then hide underneath the hospital. And when Israel bombs them, they're going to say that that was the war crime. No, the war crime is having the operation under the hospital. It shouldn't be. It's like if you took the Pentagon and you put it under the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis, and there was a military incursion, and they started bombing Minneapolis to go after the Pentagon. Well, that's a military structure. That should not be underneath a civilian hospital, or any hospital for that matter. And we'd be using our own citizens as human shields. Look at it from that perspective. Look at it from the U.S. perspective. If we were to do something like this, what we would actually be doing. That's what they are doing. Article 3, right here, talking about people. And it says, again, we'll go back here. It says, the presence of a protected person, and that's why I want to pull up Article 3 of the Geneva Convention. It says, persons taking no active part in hostilities, including members of armed forces who have laid down their arms. It continues, to this end, the following acts are and shall remain prohibited at any time and in any place whatsoever with respect to the above mentioned persons. It says violence to life and person, in particular murder of all kinds, mutilation, and cruel treatment and torture. Again, Hamas is the one of violating the Geneva Conventions by having their military targets protected by these very articles in the Geneva Convention. They're hiding behind them because they know that the criticism is and the scorn is going to be on the Israelis for attacking those targets, even though they should have been punished years ago for having those targets underneath hospitals, underneath schools. These are the people that are being defended by some people on the left. And I've probably said it 4 times already this episode, but I will say it one last time before I sign off here. You don't have to be anti the people of the Gaza Strip, the 2.2 million people, the civilians there, to be against Hamas and to realize that Hamas is putting them in harm's way. Israel is telling them to evacuate the northern part of the Gaza Strip because there's going to be a military invasion. Then you see videos out there of Hamas blocking their citizens, telling their citizens to stay because they're trying to use them as human shields. Again, there's going to be propaganda put out there. We just talked about the beheading of the children. There doesn't seem to be confirmed reports officially. At first it was confirmed, then it was unconfirmed. So who knows what to believe. When you see the stuff that Hamas had put out there, though, the videos of them murdering civilians, you know it's within the realm of possibility. Okay? Doesn't mean it's necessarily true. The things that they have already done and have broadcasted to the world to see are enough to justify the steps that Israel is going to take to defeat Hamas. And any time Hamas puts their citizens in the way, you need to be pissed at Hamas for using those innocent people, men, women, and children, in the Gaza Strip and putting them in harm's way. That's not the way that the world has worked. That's never the way the world has worked, especially since the Geneva Conventions that makes it a war crime. And that's what they're doing. They're committing war crimes by using these people as human shields. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. And I will see you all in the next video.